One typo, a single username reused in the wrong place. That's all it took to unmask the man who built a billion-dollar criminal empire hidden in the darkest corners of the internet. His name was Ross Ulbricht, but online he was known as Dread Pirate Roberts, the untouchable mastermind behind Silk Road, the internet's first dark web drug marketplace. Welcome to the Vault. I'm your host, and today we're diving into one of the most fascinating criminal cases of the digital age. This is the story of Silk Road, a hidden website where you could buy anything illegal with the click of a button. Drugs, fake IDs, hacking tools, even contract killings. For over 2 years, it operated in plain sight on the dark web, generating over $1.2 billion in sales. The FBI had no idea who was running it. The DEA couldn't shut it down. International law enforcement was baffled. The man behind it all seemed untouchable, protected by layers of encryption, anonymity, and sophisticated technology. But Ross Ulbricht made one mistake. One small digital footprint left behind years before Silk Road even existed. A username, a forum post. A moment of carelessness that would eventually lead the FBI directly to his door. This case has everything. Libertarian ideology meets criminal enterprise. Cryptocurrency before most people knew what Bitcoin was. Undercover agents, alleged murder-for-hire plots. A laptop seized in a public library, and a courtroom battle that would determine the future of internet law. What you're about to hear is based on FBI case files, DEA reports, court transcripts, trial testimony, and interviews with the agents who hunted the most wanted cybercriminal in the world. Content warning: this case involves drug trafficking, allegations of murder for hire, and illegal online activity. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's unlock the vault. To understand Silk Road, you first need to understand Ross Ulbricht. Ross was born in 1984 in Austin, Texas. He was a bright kid, earned a scholarship to the University of Texas, where he studied physics. Later, he got a master's degree in materials science from Penn State. By all accounts, Ross was brilliant, ambitious, and idealistic. He became deeply interested in libertarian philosophy, the idea that individuals should be free from government control, free to make their own choices without state interference. Ross believed the war on drugs was a failure. He believed people should have the right to put whatever they wanted into their own bodies. He believed the government had no business regulating personal choice. In 2010, Ross discovered Bitcoin, a new form of digital currency that was decentralized, anonymous, and operated outside government control. Around the same time, he learned about Tor, the onion router, software that allowed users to browse the internet completely anonymously, hiding their IP addresses and locations. Bitcoin Plus, Tor Plus, Ross's libertarian ideology. A dangerous combination. Ross had an idea. What if there was a place on the internet where people could buy and sell anything they wanted, completely free from government interference? A truly free market, operating in the shadows, beyond the reach of law enforcement? In January 2011, Ross Ulbricht began building that marketplace. He called it Silk Road. Silk Road launched on February 6, 2011. It was hosted on the dark web, the hidden part of the internet only accessible through Tor browsers. You couldn't just Google it and find it. You needed to know the exact .onion URL. The website looked like Amazon or eBay, but for illegal goods. Clean interface, user ratings, vendor profiles, a shopping cart, customer reviews. Except instead of buying books or electronics, you were buying drugs. Cocaine, MDMA, LSD, heroin, prescription pills, marijuana, psychedelics. If it could get you high, it was probably on Silk Road. All transactions were conducted in Bitcoin, which made them nearly impossible to trace. Buyers and sellers never revealed their real identities. Everything was anonymous, encrypted, and hidden. Ross operated the site under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, a reference to the character from The Princess Bride who passed the identity to successors, creating the illusion that Dread Pirate Roberts was a title, not a single person. In the beginning, Silk Road was small. A few hundred users, a handful of vendors, mostly marijuana sales. But it grew. Fast. Within 6 months, Silk Road had thousands of users. Within a year, tens of thousands. By 2013, it was generating millions of dollars in sales every month. Ross took a commission on every transaction, usually 8 to 15%. The money poured in. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, then millions. Dread Pirate Roberts was becoming rich, and the FBI had no idea who he was. By 2012, Silk Road was no longer just a website, it was a movement. Ross, as Dread Pirate Roberts, became a folk hero in certain internet circles. He was the libertarian dream made real, a man who'd created a truly free market beyond government control. He wrote manifestos on the Silk Road forums about freedom, individual liberty, and the evils of the state. Users worshipped him, vendors made fortunes. Buyers got their drugs delivered directly to their door, and law enforcement was furious, because they couldn't stop it. The DEA knew about Silk Road, the FBI knew about it. They'd been monitoring the site since late 2011, but they had a problem. How do you investigate a crime when you don't know where it's happening, who's committing it, or how to trace the money? Everything on Silk Road was designed to be untraceable. Users accessed the site through Tor, which hid their IP addresses. All payments were in Bitcoin, which was pseudonymous and hard to trace. Vendors shipped drugs through regular mail, often using fake return addresses. The website's servers were hidden, bouncing through multiple countries. Dread Pirate Roberts never revealed any personal information. Traditional law enforcement methods didn't work. You couldn't wiretap. You couldn't subpoena records. You couldn't track bank accounts. Silk Road was operating in a legal and technological grey area that law enforcement had never dealt with before. In June 2011, Senator Chuck Schumer held a press conference calling Silk Road the most brazen attempt to peddle drugs online that we have ever seen, and demanding the DEA and DOJ shut it down immediately. The publicity backfired spectacularly. Traffic to Silk Road exploded. Thousands of new users flooded the site. Media coverage made it more famous, not less. Ross, Dread Pirate Roberts, posted a message on the Silk Road forums mocking law enforcement. The more they try to shut us down, the stronger we become. This is what the free market looks like. By early 2013, Silk Road had over 100,000 registered users, nearly 1,000 vendor accounts, over $1.2 billion in total sales since launch, averaging $15 million in transactions per month. Ross Ulbricht was making approximately $20,000 per day in commissions. He'd accumulated over $80 million in Bitcoin. But Ross was getting paranoid and careless. He was living in San Francisco, moving from apartment to apartment every few months to avoid detection. He had no traditional job, no visible income, but somehow could afford expensive rent. He worked on Silk Road constantly, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. He couldn't trust anyone. He couldn't tell anyone what he was doing. The stress was immense, and it was making him desperate, which led to the darkest chapter of the Silk Road story. In January 2013, a Silk Road vendor known as Friendly Chemist contacted Dread Pirate Roberts with a threat. Friendly Chemist claimed he'd hacked into another vendor's account and stolen information about Silk Road customers, real names, addresses, transaction histories. He threatened to release this information to law enforcement unless Dread Pirate Roberts paid him $500,000. Ross was terrified. If that information became public, thousands of users would be exposed. Silk Road would collapse. He could go to prison. Ross, as Dread Pirate Roberts, didn't pay the ransom. Instead, according to FBI evidence, he contacted another Silk Road user named Red and White, who claimed to be connected to organized crime. In encrypted chat logs later recovered by the FBI, Dread Pirate Roberts allegedly wrote, "I would like to put a bounty on Friendly Chemist's head. What would it cost?" Red and White allegedly responded, $150,000, and will make the problem go away. According to the FBI, Ross paid the $150,000 in Bitcoin. A week later, Red and White sent Dread Pirate Roberts a photo of a man who appeared to be dead, along with a message, "Problem solved." Here's where it gets complicated. No body was ever found. No murder was ever confirmed. No one named Friendly Chemist was ever reported missing or dead. The FBI believes Friendly Chemist and Red and White were the same person, a scammer running a con on Ross, extorting him for money and then faking a murder to collect the hit payment. But the FBI also believes Ross genuinely tried to have someone killed. The intent was there, even if the murder didn't happen. And according to prosecutors, it happened again. In March 2013, Ross allegedly paid $500,000 to have a Silk Road employee killed after suspecting the employee was cooperating with law enforcement. Again, no murder was confirmed, but the chat logs showed clear intent. Ross was never charged with murder or conspiracy to commit murder in his federal trial. Prosecutors decided the evidence was too circumstantial, and proving the murders actually happened was impossible. But the allegations painted a dark picture. A libertarian idealist who'd started Silk Road as a victimless free market experiment had allegedly become so paranoid and desperate to protect his empire that he was willing to kill. The line between idealism and criminality had completely blurred. And while Ross was spiraling, the FBI was closing in. The FBI's investigation into Silk Road was one of the most complex cybercrime investigations in history. Special Agent Christopher Tarbell was assigned as the lead investigator in 2012. He was part of the FBI's cyber division in New York, specializing in tracking criminals on the dark web. Tarbell's problem was simple but massive. How do you find someone who's completely anonymous? The FBI tried everything. They analyzed Bitcoin transactions, trying to trace the flow of money. They monitored Silk Road activity, looking for patterns. They went undercover, posing as vendors and buyers. They worked with international partners to identify server locations. Nothing worked. Dread Pirate Roberts was a ghost. But then, in early 2013, IRS investigator Gary Alford made a breakthrough. Alford was digging through old internet forums, looking for any early mentions of Silk Road, hoping to find some clue about who'd created it. He found a post from January 27, 2011, just days before Silk Road launched, on a forum called Shroomery, a site dedicated to discussing psychedelic mushrooms. The post was by a user named Altoid and read, "I came across this website called Silk Road. It's a Tor-based marketplace. Check it out." Altoid was promoting Silk Road in its early days, trying to drive traffic to the new site. Alford kept digging. He found more posts by Altoid on other forums, Bitcoin forums, Libertarian forums, tech forums. Then, on October 11, 2011, Alford found something incredible. On a Bitcoin forum, the user Altoid had posted a question asking for help with a coding problem. The post included an email address where people could send answers. rossulbricht@gmail.com. Sound effect, Discovery Music Sting. There it was, the connection. The username Altoid was linked to the email address of Ross Ulbricht. And Altoid had been promoting Silk Road in its earliest days, before anyone knew what it was. The FBI had their first real lead. Agents began investigating Ross Ulbricht. They discovered he was a 29-year-old former physics student living in San Francisco. He had no visible job but was paying rent on expensive apartments. He'd been researching Tor, Bitcoin, and encryption technologies for years. The FBI obtained a search warrant for Ross's Gmail account. In his saved drafts, they found notes about Silk Road operations, Bitcoin wallets, and administrative tasks. They started surveillance, they tracked his location, they monitored his online activity, and they built a case. By September 2013, the FBI was ready to move. They just needed to catch him with the evidence. October 1, 2013. Glen Park Library, San Francisco, California. 3:15 p.m. Ross Ulbricht was sitting at a desk in the public library, working on his laptop. What he didn't know was that FBI agents had been following him for weeks. They knew this was where he often worked. They knew he was logged into Silk Road right now, administrating the site as Dread Pirate Roberts. They just needed to catch him in the act. Laptop open, logged in, with evidence on the screen. The FBI staged a fake distraction. Two undercover agents near Ross staged a loud, dramatic fake argument, a man and woman screaming at each other, drawing everyone's attention. Ross looked up from his laptop to see what was happening. The moment he was distracted, an FBI agent swooped in from behind, grabbed his laptop and held it open to prevent him from closing it or triggering any security measures. FBI, you're under arrest. Ross was stunned, frozen. On his laptop screen was the Silk Road administrative panel. He was logged in as Dread Pirate Roberts. The evidence was right there, undeniable. He was handcuffed and led out of the library without incident. Agents immediately began securing Ross's laptop. It was the digital equivalent of a murder weapon. It contained everything: encrypted chat logs with vendors, Bitcoin wallet passwords, administrative tools, records of transactions, the entire back end of Silk Road. Because Ross had been actively using the laptop when arrested, it was unlocked and logged in. If he'd closed it, the encryption would have locked agents out permanently. The timing of the arrest was perfect. Within hours, the FBI seized Silk Road servers. The website went dark. A message appeared on the homepage. This hidden site has been seized by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI also seized Ross's Bitcoin holdings. 144,336 Bitcoins, worth approximately $28.5 million at the time. Today, those Bitcoins would be worth over $3 billion. Ross Ulbricht, Dread Pirate Roberts, the untouchable cybercriminal, the Libertarian folk hero, was in custody. His empire was gone. His freedom was gone, and his trial was about to become one of the most controversial criminal cases in modern history. Ross Ulbricht's trial began on January 13, 2015, in Manhattan Federal Court. He was charged with narcotics trafficking, conspiracy computer, hacking conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise, the kingpin charge. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. They presented the Altoid forum posts linking Ross to Silk Road's creation, his Gmail account with Silk Road notes, chat logs from his laptop showing him operating as Dread Pirate, Roberts' Bitcoin transaction records, testimony from undercover agents who dealt with Dread Pirate Roberts, evidence of over $183 million in sales revenue. Ross's defense was creative but ultimately unsuccessful. His lawyers argued that Ross had created Silk Road initially, but sold it to others months after launch. He'd been lured back in, framed by the real Dread Pirate Roberts. The jury didn't buy it. The evidence was too strong. The altoid posts, the laptop, the Bitcoin, the administrative access. Everything pointed to Ross as the sole creator and operator of Silk Road. On February 4, 2015, after deliberating for 3.5 hours, the jury found Ross Ulbricht guilty on all 7 counts. At sentencing, the prosecution asked for a harsh sentence to send a message. The internet is not a lawless frontier. Criminals will be caught and punished. Ross's family and supporters pleaded for leniency. They argued Ross was a non-violent offender. That Silk Road had actually reduced harm by providing safer, higher-quality drugs than street dealers. That the government was making an example of him. The judge disagreed. On May 29, 2015, Judge Catherine Forrest sentenced Ross Ulbricht to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Ross's mother screamed. His supporters sobbed. Ross himself showed little emotion. He simply said, "I wish I could go back and convince myself to take a different path." Ross Ulbricht is currently serving his life sentence at USP Tucson, a high-security federal prison in Arizona. He's 40 years old. He'll die in prison. His case sparked massive debate. Supporters argue the life sentence is too harsh for a non-violent first-time offender. Ross was an idealist, not a kingpin. The government made an example of him to scare others. The murder-for-hire charges were never proven, but influenced sentencing. Critics argue Ross facilitated billions in drug sales. Silk Road enabled addiction and overdoses. He allegedly tried to have people killed. He showed no remorse and would have continued indefinitely. There have been multiple appeals. All have been denied. A clemency petition was denied by President Trump in 2021. It showed law enforcement that the dark web isn't truly anonymous, that digital footprints, no matter how small, can lead investigators to you. It showed the world that cryptocurrency, while harder to trace than traditional money, isn't untraceable. And it proved that one typo, one reused username, one moment of carelessness years before the crime, can bring down an entire criminal empire. Ross Ulbricht believed he was creating freedom. Instead, he created $1 billion drug market that harmed thousands. He thought he was untouchable, hidden behind layers of encryption and anonymity. But he used the username altoid to promote Silk Road in 2011. And he used altoid again with his real email address on a Bitcoin forum. That single mistake caught the internet's most wanted criminal. If you want more cases of cyber criminals brought to justice, subscribe to The Vault. New cases 3 to 4 times per week. Drop a comment. Do you think life in prison was too harsh? Or was justice served? And remember, the internet never forgets. Digital footprints last forever, and The Vault is always watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never underestimate the power of a paper trail, even a digital one.